guys, in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to create a material override for your renders. This could be useful. Let's say you already set up your scene, you modeled everything, you put your textures and your materials and all the materials on the models, and you set up your lighting and everything is finalized, and you have a really great render, but you really want to show off the models. A really great way to show off your models is with an ambient occlusion material. But instead of you having to put the ambient occlusion material onto all your models and then have to replace all the old materials it had, or you could, save a copy and put an ambient occlusion on the second copy, but to keep you from having to either have two copies or having to put all the original materials on, you can have it read a material only in the render instead of having it actually be on the objects. So I'm going to show you how to do that right now. The first thing we're going to do is go into render setup, because I want to set up my mental ray renderer, since I want to use the arc and design material and the ambient occlusion map, and that's only available under the mental ray renderer. So I'm going to switch that over, and now so that you can see what we're doing, I'm going to set up just like a regular, actually I'll just set up a color. We can make it green or whatever, it doesn't matter. I'll select all and put it on the objects. So if I'm going to render right now, I'll just have a regular green render. We could pretend that it's all really nice textures and stuff, and it's finalized. I'm just trying to show you the difference. So I'm going to go to a new material and click on standard, and now you can see that we have all these extra materials under the mental ray maps and materials, and I selected arc and design. I'm sorry, I went a little fast, but I selected arc and design, and right now it's really shiny and I don't really want that. So what's really great is that they have all these templates set up with different varnishes, and you can even do metals. For this we're just going to do a matte finish. It's kind of easy, kind of simple, and I really just want a nice ambient occlusion, nothing too fancy. So we'll do that, and then I'm going to scroll down to the special effects, and I'm going to click ambient occlusion to give it ambient occlusion, and I'm actually going to set up my override from now. So I'll go back to the rendering tab and go back into render setup, and in the mental ray renderer they have a processing tab, and I'll go down to here and it says material override, and I'm going to click enable, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag my arc and design material into the material slot, and a pop-up comes up and asks me if I want an instance or a copy. Now I'm going to choose an instance, because if I were to choose a copy, whatever I put in that slot right now, it's going to stay that way. But because we haven't updated or changed any of our settings, I want it to be an instance, so that as we change the settings, it will update with the within the material override. So that's the difference between a copy and an instance, and that's with anything. It says blue because it's blue in here. It shouldn't. I'll mean that AO. And it should have renamed that AO. I'll drag that in there again. I'm going to clear just because I want it to say the same thing to make sure. I like having everything named properly. So now we have our material override set up, and now if I were to render my objects are green, when I render, it's giving the no render. Although you can't really tell because it's just a flat gray right now, but when you look in here, it's still green, so we can see that it's working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up here, and in the diffuse color, I'm going to click in the settings tab, and I am going to choose the ambient reflective occlusion map, which is under the mental ray again, which is why we chose mental ray. And then we're just going to mess with the settings, really. I'm going to set my max distance. I like it pretty high. Maybe we'll do like 150. But because I have larger objects and smaller objects, I'm going to probably put down the spread a little bit to 0.5. And I'm going to bring up the samples because I have such a large max distance. The samples are kind of how many steps are in between the gradient, so to speak. So I'm going to put 200. But again, the higher the numbers, the longer your render takes and everything, of course. So let's render that and see what that looks like. You see how much longer that's taking now? So I think I'm going to start pausing while I'm rendering, and then I'll unpause it once we get back to the final render so that we don't have to just sit and watch it render. Okay, so this is what the render came out like. I'm pretty happy with it for right now, but I'm going to show you a couple of other things that can make it look just a little nicer. One of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the special effects tab, and I'm going to select round corners. So what this does is, I'm going to do a zoom, like really close up, just so that you can see, but I don't want to take too much time rendering again, so I'm going to do an extreme close up. So these are taking a long time to render, but so I could just show you this one piece is, without the rounded corners on, these pieces are really sharp, and everything is really straight and solid, and things aren't really like that in the real world. Everything has some sort of edge to them, a little bit chamfered. So even here, it's like everything is really sharp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the round corners, and 0.25 is a little high, but I'll put it on 0.15, and I'm going to render that out. I think I'm going to change the steps for right now just because it's really high, it's taking a long time to render. So I'll put that to 32, I'll put my max distance to 50. So my ambient occlusion won't look as nice, but we'll be able to see quicker the rounded edges. And what's nice is that it winds up giving everything a little bit of a chamfer without actually adding the geometry. This only comes out in the render. So sometimes, you know, it doesn't work out perfectly. Like I'd probably make it a little smaller because this looks a little melted. It looks a little weird. Although if it was metal a lot of times is melted, like welded like that. But if it was wood, it wouldn't really make as much sense. So I'd probably make, you know, I would wind up making the fillet radius a little smaller. So that's a nice addition that you can add. And then one more thing that I'm going to talk about is, you know, right now Max is rendering with its default light because we don't have any lights in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a light. I'm just going to add just an Omni, nothing too fancy. I'm going to add an Omni light up here, move it to the side, and we'll make it like a yellow. I would actually kept my settings from last time, which I kind of liked. So I set it to like a peachish color, and I gave it a really large radius. So my end radius is 15,000 and my beginning is 5,500. I wanted to give it kind of like afternoon sun. This looks kind of weird because it's green. Another thing that I'm going to do for my render is I'm going to go to environment, and I'm going to change this to a really light blue because again I'm setting up my light so that it looks like afternoon, and the sky is pretty blue in the afternoon, so I'll set that up. And again, I lowered my settings for my ambient occlusion just so that the render time didn't take as long, but the whole point of the tutorial was more about the material override, just setting up the ambient occlusion. So again, you can do these settings and do different things with them. You can even use ambient occlusion. You can use any different kind of material. Again, depending on what you're building. Let's say you were doing an industrial kitchen or something, and you wanted to give it a pearl finish or a little bit more of a shinish or tar. But it would affect the wheel, affects everything. Any object that's in there winds up getting the override. But again, as you can see, it can be useful just to get a quick, nice render of things. So that's my tutorial, and I hope you